Okay, hi everyone. Let's take a look at problem 9-22A, where we are looking at applying overhead and overhead variances. I'll read the problem to you. Thomas Corporation manufactures a single product that requires a great deal of hand labor. Overhead cost is applied on the basis of standard direct labor hours. The company's condensed flexible budget for manufacturing overhead is given below. And you see the information in the screen. We have overhead cost, a cost formula per direct labor hour and direct labor hours. Below that it says the company's product requires 4 pounds of material that has a standard cost of $8 per pound and 8 hours of direct labor time that has a standard rate of $12 per hour. Now, that was just to the left of where I'm moving the mouse now. Sliding down, the next section says the company planned to operate at a denominator activity level of 24,000 direct labor hours and to produce 3,000 units of product during the most recent year. Actual activity and cost for the year were given in this table below. Alright, now let me slide a little bit and see if we can see what the problem asked us. Okay, so if I slide down here, it says requirement 1, compute the I'm reading to the left of my mouse here. Compute the predetermined overhead rate for the year. Break the rate down into variable and fixed elements. Alright, now what I want to do is move over to the right and I'll show you where I work this one. Okay, you should see that now on the screen. Now, so we drop in the overhead and the direct labor hours, and they gave us 144,000 as the overhead cost. Now let me slide up and show you where that came from. That's right here. I'll slide back. I know this is going to be a little bit awkward as I move this, but there's the 144,000 of variable manufacturing overhead costs at that flexible budget level of 24,000 units. So if I slide, I'm going to slide just over enough so we can see the answer to the bottom right. That's where the 144 comes from. Now the fixed costs are equal to 120,000, and there's the fixed cost just to the left of my mouse, and it's the same regardless of what level of activity you have. The direct labor hours were 24,000, and so if we divide those, right, we come up with $6 is my variable portion and $5 is my fixed, and then of course you can just sum across, right, add across and do the same division, and we come up with a total predetermined overhead rate of $11 per direct labor hour. Okay, now I've moved the screen and I'm going to focus down here at the bottom where it says prepare a standard cost card for the company's products. Show the detail of all manufacturing costs on your standard cost card. And if we slide to the right, you'll see where I've worked that one out. And so what you see is they gave us all the information. Direct materials, 4 pounds at $8 comes to $32. That would be the cost per unit for the product. Direct labor takes 8 hours, right, times $12. That gives us 96, and I'm just multiplying 8 times 12. Variable overhead, 8 direct labor hours times $6. There's my 8 times the value in N32, which is given right there, right? We've calculated that. The fixed overhead, we're taking the 8 direct labor hours times the $5 that we computed earlier, and then we sum them, and we come up with a standard cost per unit of $216. Okay, next to the left of my mouse we'll tackle requirement 3, which says compute the standard direct labor hours allowed for the year's production, and then prepare the manufacturing overhead T account for the year. Now I'm going to slide to the right and show you how we work those. Okay, so the standard direct labor hours was 3,500 units were produced, and the budgeted or predetermined amount was 8 direct labor hours per unit. So all we need to do is multiply 3,500 times 8, and we come up with 28,000 of standard direct labor hours. On part B, we have to fill out the manufacturing overhead. What we know is actual cost of 292,800 were incurred. And if you look back, the earlier section, you'll see where they provided that information. we had $168,800 plus $124,000 of actual costs. Okay, then on the applied, we would have to take the 28,000 of standard direct labor hours allowed that we just calculated in requirement 3A and multiply it times the value we have sitting in Q56, and Q56 then is well, let's go take a look at I'm sorry, Q56 is the 28,000. We need to multiply that by what we had in P32, and if I slide up, let me slide this up and I'll show you what's in P32. Okay, and there's the cell in P32, which was the total overhead rate. Okay, so you see how that works. We take the overhead rate, multiplied it times the standard direct labor hours. And that gives us the applied. When we compare that to the actual cost, we're able to compute what the manufacturing overhead T account looks like. Okay, now the next part is requirement 4. In reading to the left of the mouse, it says compute the variable overhead spending and efficiency variances and the fixed overhead budget and volume variances. I'll slide off to the right and show you how we come up with this. And you'll see I like to use the column form. So I'm going to break out the actual hours and actual rate when I have the information. We had 29,600 of actual hours. We had total actual spending of 168.8. Okay, that's given in the problem. So then we can force the middle ground, which is the actual rate. We're able to calculate a $5.70 rate. Moving over to the standard hours it allowed, 28,000 hours was allowed. We've calculated that earlier, and we know that the rate per hour is $6 called for in the standard. So when I multiply that across, I come up with 168,000. Now if I move the values according to the arrow, so I'll drop one here and I'll drop an arrow here, we come up with what I call the middle ground. It's actual hours times standard rate, and then we can compare the summation of that. You know, we multiply 29.6 times $6. That's the product, not the summation. Wrong choice of words, I apologize. But we can compare the product getting from the middle column to the column on the left dealing with actual, and what we see is we're $8,800 favorable in spending. When we move over and compare the middle ground to the standard hours, we're unfavorable to the tune of 9,600. Okay, so that gives us our spending variance, which is favorable, and our efficiency variance. Okay, now when we do the fixed overhead budget and volume variances, we drop in the 24,000 actual hours at the actual rate and compared it to the fixed overhead cost applied to the work in process, which was 3,500 hours at 3,500 hours at 8. Let me say that correctly. 3,500 units at $8 per unit. And when we then use, they also told us that the rate given is $5. And so we can multiply that across and come up with the total dollars at fixed overhead cost applied to the work is 140,000. Now down on the actual side, again we have the same sort of approach. We know there's 24,000 of actual hours that were used, and we know that the total cost was 124,000. This is for fixed overhead now, different from the variable, and we can force in the rate, which is 517. So once we've done that, we again use our little arrows techniques to show which numbers go where to create the middle column, and we can compare the difference between budgeted fixed overhead and actual fixed overhead, and we come up with 4,000 unfavorable. When we compare budgeted fixed overhead to fixed overhead cost applied to work in process, we've got a $20,000 volume variance. One's called a budget variance and one's a volume variance, and that is how we would calculate the various variances that we need to calculate on part 4.